Hello, Deep Mindfulness Collective. My name is Janusz, and this is the Joy of Being AliveStream. We are very happy to be here, very happy to be joined by you in particular, and we're going to be diving into some of this material here. First thing we want to do is do a little bit of a technical check. Yesterday we had some folks accurately describe that we had some serious challenges with our details of our live stream. Some of the audio was pretty crazy. So I'm going to jump into the chat as we're getting rolling here. Just want to do a little check here. We got Lewis from the UK. Lewis, you know what? I happen to have known you're here. I'll tell everybody why soon. Lewis is here joining us from the UK. So how is audio? Yesterday was really blown out. It's really intense. How is video? Audio's good. Great. So as we begin to roll, let's hear where folks are coming from. I'd be very curious to hear where folks are joining us from. We have Lewis from the UK. We have a few more people on here. Some people don't have access to the text, so we'll let that be. But let us know where you're coming from. So welcome everyone. This is the Joy of Being AliveStream. This is where we explore and discuss the deeper side of meditation, and we don't just discuss it, we actually do it. So for today's episode, we're going to be discussing partially the way the mind creates and constructs reality and the way we experience that on a moment-to-moment basis. Another thing I want to talk about, which is something I've been thinking about recently, is the role of I was going to say guilt, but actually the role of mourning. How mourning and actually allowing the mourning process to occur when there are disappointments in our life. I contend as a spiritual teacher or a meditation teacher, mindfulness teacher, to look at the experience of the world and say, well, I shouldn't be having this experience. I want to be totally equanimous, this kind of thing. So how can we actually use the tools of processing that material to actually move through it instead of denying that we're having those experiences? So welcome. Let's say cool pseudonym says Janusz. I wasn't able to join yesterday. Do you know if the recording will be available or was the audio so bad that it won't be? Well, in a sense, it's up to you folks. Hey, Deb's here joining us from Brooklyn. It's up to you folks. So if you think it was worth it, then we will cut it up and post it. I want to try to fix the audio if possible. There's a few little technical things because of the way it was laid out. People could see the mouse moving around. So it's funny how much setup we did and how funny the end result came. So if folks want to see it, we will put it out. My other option was to try to redo it, which would be a little bit of a hassle for Michael since he's so generous with his time. But let us know. What do you think? Do you want that out there? I'm sure we'll probably make a less crackly version next time, but for now we'll see. So welcome, folks. A little bit about what this little live stream is going to look like. First, we're going to just chat a little bit, say hello. This is the friendliest chat on the internet, so connect with folks, say what's up to everyone around, and let us know where you're coming from. Then we're going to meditate for about 25 minutes. We're going to be today meditating on the experience of internal seeing, the way the mind is related to the outer seeing experience, the way there's a connection there between those two things. This is one of the most important sort of hidden gems within Shinzen system. If you're not really familiar with Shinzen system, it's actually very central. He doesn't actually centralize it. For me, it's incredibly powerful. I was talking with Michael yesterday about how this is one of the most important parts of Shinzen system, most important parts of what I use for new students. Then we're going to have some time for any questions or reports. So if you have any questions during the stream or during the guided meditation, just let those float in the back, and we'll be able to answer those afterwards. But we're also going to have a very special guest today, one of our many-time co-hosts, which is Lewis. Lewis is actually going to be joining us on the stream live, so he can talk a little bit about any questions he has, and we're going to do a little bit of a Dharma diagnosis, see what's going on, and it's kind of a mini version of what I might do with a new one-on-one student. It's live. We haven't talked before. I know very little about his practice, so you'll actually get to see me figure that out as we go, and then we'll have a little bit of time for people to say hello one more time. So that's our general breakdown of what today is going to look like. So if you're just joining us now, welcome. Let us know where you are joining us from. Annie Bickerton is joining us. Annie, it's so wonderful to see you. It was so great to see you the other night. If anyone does not know, which you probably don't, Annie is now engaged, and I had the joy of being able to share that celebration with her and her new fiance and a bunch of lovely people in a beautifully decorated plant space. So congratulations. I am currently also engaged. It's wonderful. Let's see. Smatic 1001 says, hello from Illinois. Well, welcome from Illinois. And then Gabriel from Montreal. Gabriel, great to see you. Glad that you're here. It's such a fun thing to host people from all over the place. What a joy. I couldn't ask for more here. Oh, and we have, okay, great. So folks, we're going to be practicing in stillness. What that's going to mean is we're going to want to find a way to hold the body still for the duration of the sit. We do that by arranging the body well, sitting at the edge of the cushion or chair, letting the hips rock down as you sit at the edge of the cushion, allowing the spine, lower spine to curve naturally, allowing the upper spine to curve naturally so that you can have a balance point, not needing to stretch in either way to keep yourself balanced. Yeah, there are some folks in the hood and local folks. So one thing I never thought of that this stream might provide is actually a way for people to connect. So if people are near each other and you want to connect in a safe way, obviously make sure to stay safe and everything. Definitely cross paths and that kind of thing. There's already two people in this stream who are Deborah, who does body work here in Brooklyn, and John, who needed some body work. They're in contact now, so that's really helpful. We have Linda, hey, watching from my public transit in between work and laundry here in Norrköping, Sweden. I think that's how you said to pronounce it. Or if I think that's wrong, actually. I think that's a different pronunciation, but Norrköping, Sweden. That's my guess. Wonderful. Okay, so here we are, ready to meditate. So when you're ready, finding a nice comfortable position. I find that any day I'm about to start recording again, all the lawnmowers and sirens come out. So I don't know if folks can hear that stuff in the background, but it's pretty funny to me. I remember I used to have a challenge, and I'd say, I'm going to take a nap right now and watch. No music all day long. I'm just going to take a nap, and as soon as I lay down, the music next door will start, and it would be it's like I had a magical power. So pardon me. So when you're ready, taking a few comfortable deep breaths and just gently closing the eyes. Just beginning your practice. And I'll ring the bell in just a few moments. beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths and just feeling the body rise and fall. Beginning by sweeping through the body to be sure we're not holding any undue tension. Starting at the top of the head, relax the brow. Relax the muscles behind the eyes. Allow the face to go smooth. Relax the back of the tongue and let the jaw go slack. Relax the neck and the shoulders. The upper arms, elbows, forearms, wrists, and relaxing the hands. Tuning into the subtle sensations in the palms of the hands and tips of the fingers. Letting go of any attempt to control the breath, just letting the body breathe as it will. Noticing the natural tightening and relaxing of the upper chest and upper back as the breath comes and goes. Relaxing the belly and the lower back. Relaxing the hips and the upper legs. Relaxing the knees and calves. Relaxing the ankles and relaxing the feet. And tuning into any neutral or pleasant sensations anywhere in the body. And letting those sensations show you what the present moment is like. And bringing awareness of those sensations, those pleasant or neutral sensations, in relationship to the breathing process. So perhaps we feel the breath all throughout the body, or someplace smaller, like the abdomen rising and falling. Or perhaps someplace even smaller, like the tip of the nose. Wherever we detect the breath, looking for these subtle sensations at the edge of these breath sensations. And as much as possible, falling in love with these sensations. And depending on the day, we're going to have more or less ability to stay with these subtle sensations. So if we find that it's difficult today, doing whatever we need to stay with them for just one breath cycle, one full in-breath and out-breath. Or if we find it helpful, we could employ a breath counting strategy. Counting 1 before the next in-breath, closely following the sensations of the in-breath and out-breath, and then counting 2. Continuing in this way, upwards to 10 and then backwards down from 9 to 1. And making any adjustments we need to if we're less concentrated. We can count 1 on both sides of the in-breath. 1 on both sides of the out-breath, counting 2. Breathing in, counting 2. Or we could even say the number 2 continuously throughout the breath if we're quite distracted today. Whatever will keep 90% of awareness with the sensations of the breath. If we lose count, just starting again at any number, no big deal. Sometimes the pleasantness of these sensations can pull us into a kind of soft unconsciousness, a pleasant dullness. And if we've lost connection with the vivid quality of our sensations, simply bringing awareness back to these qualities and seeing if this is enough to dissipate this dullness. If not, we could always allow a little light into the eyes or open the eyes fully and allow them to settle on one point. Now we're going to make a little transition. I'd like you to bring awareness to the darkness of closed eyes. If you're unsure if you can see closed eyes at this point, just allowing the eyes to squinch and then relax again so you can see the difference between the dark and light. So aware that you're seeing. Perhaps aware that there's a sense of space, a sense of location. We tend to identify the self as being at the center of that. But notice what happens as I say certain words. The mind will quickly flash an image of these things. And then that image will slowly fade away. No need to try to imagine anything. So if I were to describe to you a boat, the mind would immediately start trying to fill this image. And typically we experience these images as though they're appearing right in front of us. So this is a boat, but what I forgot to mention about this is it's actually a toy boat. Notice if the mind quickly jumped to change any of the details. I also didn't mention about this boat that it has a white hull and a yellow sail. And often what happens is the mind will flash a few images, give us a vague sense of each of them, and then when one of them is confirmed, the mind will tell us that's what we were thinking all along. I also forgot to mention that this boat has a white hull, but it has a giant, wide, blue diagonal stripe across that hull. And the yellow sail actually has a giant red dot in the middle of it. Again, not trying to produce anything, just noticing that the mind will give us this information. If we even understand the words, the mind will show us what we understand just briefly, and the picture and colors will drain away back to this gray, black and white, blank space. Notice we can look at the bottom of the boat. There's no sail here, simply a white hull with a blue diagonal line cutting across. The mind can easily tell the front and the back of the boat even from below because of the different shapes. We can see the boat from the front. And from here it's simply a white shape with a thin sliver of yellow with occasional flashes of red. And we can look at the boat from above. And for the first time, we can see the deck of the boat. And notice, without describing anything, the mind will fill in details of the color of the deck, the texture. Notice that without much trouble, the mind can zoom all the way into the texture and detail of the boat, of the deck. How close can you zoom in? Noticing what occurs to the overall image as you do this. There's only so much real estate in consciousness, so as we zoom into the detail, it can have a kind of obliterating effect on the rest of the image, but then we can snap back to the image. The mind will jump back and forth, task switching. The mind has a hard time showing us both the detail of the deck and the entire boat. Not impossible. Just slightly difficult. Now I'd like you to try to move this boat over to your left side. See how far the boat can go comfortably before there's a kind of strain. Letting it slide slowly towards your periphery. Noticing if it's more challenging to move the boat past roughly where your peripheral vision would be. You can try it on the other side as well. I'm playing around with this. If it's available to just simply move the boat around to see where the edges of mental seeing are, at least in detail. The mental screen which makes up where we experience memory, planning, fantasy. Noticing what happens if you try to look at the detail of some part of the boat, maybe the fabric of the sail, very closely, and at the same time think of the boat as being far away. Notice that the mind can struggle with this. It can feel like it's simply switching between a sense of the boat being far, far away, off on the horizon, or beyond the horizon, in the detail of the sail. It's not impossible, but it's a different function. The mind is using the arrangement function, this sense of over there. It's almost tossing the image. So taking a little while and just letting yourself explore. If you want to create other images, you can, but the key is not to create images, it's simply to notice what the mind does. What are the parameters of this screen where we see images? If a color appears, what happens to it? If I describe a bright yellow lemon, How long is that color vivid before it fades back into this gray, black and white, X-ray looking world? We can have a general sense of our environment, but if we try to observe detail, let's say detail of the space behind us, the mind will show us a sense of space behind, and typically will display the detail as though it were in front of us, and tend to imply that it's actually behind. Looking at the fine-grained detail of something behind us, and checking in to see, where does that detail occur? Does it occur behind us, or does the sense of space occur behind us and the detail occur on the screen? So just having some fun and exploring. And allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, seeing if you can still connect with this sense of the screen, and eventually allowing the eyes to settle on one point as they fully open. And noticing that even with the eyes open, we can still detect this sailboat, the detail of the deck, the sense of it being far away, the sense of environment, the sense of a body below. All of this material is available even as the eyes are open, noticing that seeing is not the same as mental seeing. And seeing if we can continue this practice all throughout our day. Okay. Wonderful. So welcome, folks. A few people have joined us on the way. Eric, welcome. Oh, good. Eric's telling us he has a wonderful, amazing, incredible experience. Oh, of course. I'm so happy I could be helpful. Thank you so much for joining. If you're just joining us partway through, we're going to talk a little bit about people's experience, and then we're going to jump in with our friend here who's joining us. We're going to do a little Dharma chat. Lewis is going to be joining us from the UK. So let's see some of these comments here. Let's see. Hello from Toronto. 9 days of Shinzen retreat last week. Oh, lovely. So you're at the retreat. That's so good. I hope it went well. Oh, you said it was a wonderful experience. I thought you were talking about the meditation. There I was assuming. Let's see. Linda says, nope, can't picture that. Colors and patterns have no smell or touch. Thus, I go blank. So, Polly, if you're saying that you're not noticing any particular image, that's actually fine. The blankness is actually a perfectly good object, and the fact that it typically has a spatial arrangement. It's either a large blankness or it's a small blankness. If it's empty, that's also kind of spatial arrangement. So those are all parts of CN. So any kind of arrangement, any sense of location, if the blankness is in front of you, the fact that you're saying I see nothing is actually typically an indication that it's in front of you. So just noticing that all of those are aspects of CN. First, I smelled the ocean and harbor and felt the touch of the wet wooden boat. Then I smelled the bathtub and the shampoo and the stuff and the wet plastic boat. The toy boat was red, as in my childhood. And the mind starts to produce all of these different, associations, and sometimes people will totally go on some, mental direction, which is just to notice that the mind is doing it. It's funny. I think I might have told some folks this story before, but I led this meditation as part of a series on observing the mind and this kind of thing. And years later, I saw someone in the street, and I was, going to get to an appointment, and they were going the other direction, and they stopped me, and they're like, "Oh, I want to thank you so much. This is I love that meditation you taught. Anytime I'm stressed out, I just think about a boat, and I just feel so good." And I'm like, that was not what I intended. It's definitely like a little bit of a mic check. You just do it to see that what's there, and then after that, you're going to be observing in general, not creating an image of a boat as your meditation. But listen, if it's helping, then I am all for it. So if that's what works for you, then definitely just imagine a boat. Any other reports or questions before we jump into our guest? Lovely. And I hadn't mentioned this before, but we support this stream by a few ways. One is simply sharing the stream, letting people know that it's happening. That's actually an incredibly useful and helpful way to support us, support what we're doing here. If you feel like this practice is valuable for yourself or for the world, sharing it is actually an incredible way to do that. And also people support directly, which is totally wonderful, and we use that to go right back into the stream. We're going to be using the upcoming contributions towards supporting creating videos actually right now between myself and Michael's channel. Specifically, there are tools that are used to help us understand what people are searching, because you sort of don't know. And it's helpful to tailor the content to that, because then more people will see it and we'll have a better chance to have people have contact with serious practice. If you do feel like supporting us financially, well, the first person that does it in the stream, I don't think anyone has yet. The first person in the stream will get high fives from me, and the last person in the stream will get to be our co-host for the next stream. So tomorrow's stream is coming up very soon. We want to thank Ferdy for being the co-host here and taking care of all the heavy lifting over here. Really holding the equanimity down, our equanimity chair, as it were. Okay, we have some comments here. Eric says, talking about the meditation. Oh, you were talking about the meditation. Oh, I'm glad it was a wonderful experience. That's so wonderful. I'm surprised by the connection to feel and see spaces. That's we're going to go over that a little later, the relationship between the different sense gates and how each one triggers each other. But that's actually a very classic insight, is the insight of cause and effect, and noticing when a mental image like this appears, a body sensation like this appears, or when a body sensation or emotion like this appears, a mental image like this appears, and just starts to see how these things are affecting each other. With that insight, you can actually start to really deconstruct some maladaptive mind states, because we can have some situation that's really troubling us. And I'll just be less abstract. I think it's helpful to know that teachers struggle and teachers have difficulties too. So one thing that I've been struggling with is putting myself to bed, putting the baby to sleep at night. And what I find is that if I just will listen, this is so funny. This is a real, view into my inner landscape. If I just listen to people argue on YouTube about topics, people that I like who typically win arguments, it's like, of course you want to hear the person you like winning. There's a YouTuber called Destiny who argues a bunch of like right-wing people. You're getting an expose of my politics, but I'll just put that on at night and it'll help me go to sleep. And I haven't been looking at, okay, what is the emotion there that's actually causing the system to rev and keep going? What is the body sensation? Can I have equanimity with both of those as they're coming up and arising? Not that listening to arguing isn't a skillful way to go to bed. It's fine. It's not harming anyone. But in terms of deconstruction, to notice the relationship, okay, what is triggering what? What's triggering the sense that I don't want to go to the meditation? Or what's triggering the sense of a resistance to go to the practice that I know works very beautifully? So that's just a little personal anecdote. Okay, here. Linda says, yeah, I know, but I do see something. Okay, great. I didn't know if you were saying, some people say they just don't see anything. I see colored dots moving about in the blank space. That's fine. Yeah, just observe what's happening. If you can notice the relationship of see in and see out, so the way that we can see all these sort of things swirling around in our experience, and the mind will tend to want to grip them into patterns or say, okay, well, these dots are actually, spots of water or whatever it'll do. I've had the experience doing candle flame meditation, the fire casino practice, where it'll look like just all the regular patchiness of, mental seeing, but suddenly the mind will form it all. The first time I noticed it, the mind formed the entire visual plane into antique legs of furniture, and everything just suddenly solidified. So it's this relationship between see out and see in that way. So yeah, just have fun exploring that. Eric says, as I move the image, I feel the edge. I feel the edge of space. Then it pops and keeps moving. Yeah, and just to notice that, just to notice what occurs. I noticed some tendencies. I mentioned some tendencies today, but I didn't want to say any of those are rules. Those are tendencies that tend to happen. Just can't conceptualize visual description. That's fine. And don't feel like you're losing anything there. Again, I do more specific detail than Shinzen is willing to do because I think he wants it to be more universal. But because of that, I'm going to exclude some people, which is a bummer. So let me know the details that aren't working for you, or if you'd like it to go in a different direction. And people who know me long enough know that's going to influence the way that I lead the practice. Yes, when I can go through touch, I'm able to see too. Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. So Bob says, buoyed by Michael's praise for see-in's potential, I'm excited to explore, but my detection and discrimination ability is still very dry and limited. As well, practice makes permanent. Exactly. And so just over and over and over again to return to the experience of trying to view it. One of the most fun practices that I like to do, that I give to students as an assignment, is to observe the experience of see in and stand up and move around and actually walk around or move the body while I'm practicing, because the mind just completely keeps insisting that there's material there in order to keep us oriented and safe. And if you get ever disoriented, you open the eyes and do a reverse blink. If you have a very wide open space, you can put your hands behind your back and sort of walk and notice that the mind will sort of flash images at you, showing you detail, typically to try to strike you with a little bit of fear so that you'll open and look around. That's one thing that the mind will try to do. But even if you stand still and just move the body, or do a walking practice with the eyes closed, so you have to do a reverse blink every once in a while to make sure you're oriented. But after a while, the mind will present the material so clearly that it'll look like a moonlit night. It'll just look like your eyes are open in a brightly lit moonlit night. Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. Deborah, you get triple high fives from me. Whoopsh, whoopsh, whoopsh. Thank you so much for that. Really do appreciate your support in that. Thank you so much. You are currently in line to be our co-host tomorrow. It's funny how people give and they donate, and then they have to do the work of co-hosting. So it's a little bit of, that's the trick. See, you can't. So we trick people into working. Let's see. You're paying to be, to do work. It's like an internship at MTV or something like that. Eric says, I have seen the trigger cascade of sense gates. One triggers the next in time. I've seen the large scale trigger overlap. The subtle dynamic interplay is very cool. Yeah, and we all know the overlap because of any time we're overwhelmed. The overlap is happening so quickly that we lose track completely, and it feels like we have lost control of our being, and it's so intense that we don't have the ability to navigate that. Okay, folks, so we're going to bring in our guest here. Let's jump to that. Okay, let's see. Hello, sir. Are you audible?
Hello, am I?
Oh, you are quite audible. That is lovely, lovely. Okay, let me take a look here and make sure that this is the crop is a little wrong. Oh, yeah. There we go. Very cool, very cool. So why don't you just say hello, let folks know who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Hello. I'm Lewis. If you're on Stream Entries subreddit, I'm Tetris McKenna, which is a very silly name. I've been meditating about 6 years now, I think. And yeah, thanks for having me on and doing this little diagnostic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see how it goes. So we have you can attest to this. We've never met in person. We've never talked beyond what's happened in the stream. Is that about right?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So let's do it. So what's up? What's going on with your practice?
So
tell me a little bit about the history. What led you up to where you are now?
Well, when I was a student, I had a bit of a run-in with psychedelics, which I understand is quite common for many people who get into this stuff. And there was something I noticed about those experiences that, there was all this wacky, crazy visual stuff going on and sort of strange sensations, but there was something common to every single experience, whether regular life, psychedelic trip, whatever, and that was the awareness of it. And so that sort of got me curious as very much a skeptic in meditation practice. And so I found Daniel Ingram's book and tried that for a while, and then found Shinzen's system, started practicing that stuff. So yeah, that sort of brings me up to today, where life is just as psychedelic without the actual psychedelics now, because practice is very interesting.
Lovely. And so tell me a little bit about what's your, so it sounds like you have some experience with path material, with Daniel talking about the sort of stages and that kind of thing. Do you have any sense of where you land on that, or is it just more, Shinzen has much more of an open exploration model where you're just sort of going potentially in any direction, although he doesn't deny any of those path sort of things that people can have that as well. So where do you fit into that constellation?
I've had a few different kind of experiences here and there that you could call fruition, but I don't really know in terms of the path map where I am. I've never been that kind of attracted to the mapping system, and I do prefer Shinzen's approach of just exploring and seeing what happens, and getting out there and exploring experience rather than getting caught up in all these sort of tracks and maps, because I find that quite often you can get kind of sucked into the descriptions of what these things are going to be like, and then trying to kind of create conditions rather than just experiencing what's happening. So that's sort of where I'm at. Recently I did the Formless Realms home practice program with Michael Taft, and that kind of just blew my head off completely. I mean, that was like a depth that I'd never reached before, so that was really something. And I think lately in my practice, what's been interesting is that whenever I get sort of slightly concentrated, like just now during that practice, the closed eyes seeing experience, I tend to get like this kind of expansive horizon coming out 3D in front of me to infinity, kind of like the fifth jhana,
Okay.
infinite space. So it's kind of interesting that trying to do a specific practice, that just sort of comes up, and it can be kind of distracting almost, that if that's not what I was intending to do, suddenly there's this giant space in front of me and I'm like, whoa, okay. So I guess I'm not sure whether to, use the kind of ion thing of just go with it and go into that, or keep doing the practice I actually intended to do.
Yeah. Well, for me, I really like to go from this model of values, because often what happens, and this is true for any teacher, it's true for me, but they'll have their own general set of values and say, okay, this is the thing you want to gear yourself and your life and your practice towards. For some people, it's serving others. For some people, it's really cool psychedelic experiences. For other people, it's psychological well-being, this kind of thing. For you, looking at the holistic map of practice in life, relationships, your sense of fulfillment in your life, all of this sort of larger material, if in 5 years this went really well and you're like, wow, I can't believe this certain thing happened, or maybe it was Michael's guidance or something like that, it had this major effect and now my life has changed in this way that is really where I wanted it to be, not just the practice but life as well. What might that look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking, so now there's this access to these crazy psychedelic states, and actually it's not all that interesting almost. It's you kind of get used to it, and it's just what it is. So I find recently it's interesting that, so my path has been quite insight heavy, and I have some insight, but I still find myself kind of driven by sort of craving behaviors sometimes. And it's weird because I have this kind of mindfulness where I can see, so like, for example, last week, I've been going through some like job interviews recently, so there's been like some kind of stress, and I think, I'll reward myself with like a takeout meal, and I find myself, the night before thinking like, I really deserve this really salty, fatty meal that I can't afford. And then, it comes to the next day and I kind of see it going like building up to the point. And all the while I'm thinking, actually this, you don't need this. You could eat a healthy meal that you already have at home. But then somehow it builds up and up and up until the action happens. And I'm kind of watching it almost from a detached place, going like, whoa, this is just happening. Even though I'm sort of not that into it, it's still happening, the action. And even I'll find myself kind of like looking at the, the order page and then going, okay, this is actually what I want to do. I'm going to close this. Much better. But then 10 minutes later, it's back up and like, I just hit pay and it's coming. So it's this kind of strange thing of like, there's mindfulness, but there's still this kind of compulsion that's driving behavior.
Yeah, and that's absolutely normal. That's an ordinary human experience. I think one of the things that I've come to find really helpful is to recognize just that what's occurring is nature, and those cravings and those desires, I don't think they, and from talking to people who are very deeply realized on this path, I don't think those actually go away. I think they begin to be experienced more so as a hologram, more so as just a force pushing in the body, no more important than a temperature change, or a mild temperature change. A big temperature change, we'd probably respond similarly. There's this really intense cold pressure on us and we just have to get out of the room. We don't even think about it. We just instinctively go to the thing. We realize, actually, I'm in this cold chamber because I'm in a metaphor, and this metaphor's got to keep going. So we think I got to stay here, and then a minute later we're headed out the door again. It's just another force impacting the body-mind. So first is to recognize that it's nature, because even the resistance to the fact of it coming up can be really challenging. But it sounds like there's a bit of a conflict here between what you want to be doing and what's actually happening, that there's a degree of awareness of your own experience, and then at the same time there are these sort of forces that are that behaviors are occurring within the system that you don't want to be there. Is that about right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So there's sort of like a little bit of a struggle, and then because the behavior might be unhealthy or immoral in some way, there's kind of this judgment of do I just let it go? Do I let it just run its course, or do I try and actively stop it? But then there's this whole conflict of like, well, who's stopping it and who's letting it go anyway? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of a struggle.
Yeah, and what you're describing is also very common. How do we have deep acceptance? How do we really accept what is occurring at this fundamental existential level and affect change in our lives? And this is a really big classic struggle, which is, it comes up in politics as well. How do we actually recognize that there are problems in the world and then make change in order to affect that, but also have acceptance? Like, how could those two possibly really align? And what I think is important to recognize is that there's two different relationships going on here. Ideally, the way I think about it is that ideally the inner system we want to have, the ideal setting is 0, just a complete ability to have neutral experiences with our inner experience. And then the outer ideal setting is +1, meaning we're trying to make positive change in the world. We're trying to move towards, and this is the question mark, we're trying to move towards something, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that we want to recognize that if we try to use the rules of the transcendent material on the outside world, well, that's very self-denying. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? You should have no desire, and also you shouldn't be worried about any social problems because you don't have a self. Like, don't forget about what's happening politically or what's happening, that's unfair in the world, because there is no self, right? So we apply transcendent material to the outside, non-transcendent world, and there becomes problems. If we apply the logic of the outside world, well, listen, what you got to do is, get a job, work hard, help people, this kind of thing, to the inside world, where we want to be learning how to not effort, how to experience what's happening without changing anything. Well, then it gets confusing, and we're trying to, sort of beat up our inside world in that way. So we want to recognize that the two logics for a period of time in practice are separate. They're two different things that we want to know differently, and over time they end up merging back together, and we see the way that these are actually one thing. But it can be helpful at first to conceptualize them as two different sets of logic. We want to have the transcendent logic on our internal experience, and then externally our behaviors, our morality, basically. We want to have a relationship there. So I just want to double check the time, because okay, good. I have a private student coming up after this, but if I thought I was potentially had to stop for this minute, or I have more time. So what I would be curious about is around values. Anytime I start working with a new student, and as I mentioned, this is sort of a miniature version of what I might do with a new student, we talk about what are your top 10 values. And I can actually, if people are interested, I can send you a form or a process that I use to get people to find those. It's online. It's called the values card sort, and you just cut up the cards. You get your top 10, you can rewrite them, redefine them, whatever you want, but you're trying to get down to 10 values. In this case, what would be, if you had to live on a desert island for the rest of your life, what would be 4 values, 4 things that would be kind of guiding principles, things that are valuable to you that you would want to have with you?
That's a good question, yeah. And it's something I've been thinking about recently, about sort of this problem of behavior, so the values thing. So what is it that this wants to kind of express in the world? I think like peacefulness is one. That's kind of just I like having harmonious kind of relationships and sort of quiet, peaceful behaviors. Joy.
Well, I just want to back up one. Is that peacefulness related to the experience of equanimity? I hear something in there around that, or is that?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So just equanimity, joy, which is since starting the stream, that's something that's become more of a value to me than before, because it's something I had almost overlooked somehow in Buddhist practice, is just the joyfulness of it, of life, and not being sort of life denying and life is suffering, life is pain, etc.
Yeah,
which is kind of silly. I guess like knowledge, like I'm a big reader, I'm a programmer for work, so I like being able to learn new things and interesting ideas. And I guess love. That's the final one probably.
Can you describe what you mean by that?
Just a sort of acceptance and allowance for everyone in everything in experience.
So love for others, love for the people around you.
Yeah.
And in those, in the love side, what about the support, getting the support you need, getting the care that you need? Is that included in that, like that it's both ways, or does it seem more important to be able to love and care for the people who are around you?
I think it's both ways. Yeah. But possibly, maybe it overlooks myself sometimes.
Okay.
That sometimes it's a little more focused on the external.
Right.
And yeah, it could be a bit self-denying perhaps.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I typically will do this exercise with folks, especially when you get into a few more. But basically, to start to look, and what we can do is you can either do it on your own, or we can do it now, is just give a score to each one of these, where you're at now, without a lot of judgment. It's normal that we would have aspirations. The structural premise of an aspiration is we are not there yet. So it sounds like in your description of love, it sounds like you had joy, peace, knowledge, love. And in love is to care for, tell me if this is correct, to care for and have a accepting relationship with those around you, and then to have that be reciprocal. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that there might be a bit of a gap between the external and the internal, allowing that in that way.
Yeah. Totally, yeah.
Yeah. And again, when I'm working with folks one-on-one, typically we're not live on the internet, so that's it's understandable. So I'm going to ask a personal question. If at any point anything is you just say, no, I prefer not to talk about it. It's not only, I would actually, in terms of self-care, I would encourage that. Say, actually, no, I don't want to talk about that. So the question is, again, you can say yay or nay. What systems do you have in place, or what do you do in your life if things are challenging for yourself? Like if the stuff really hit the fan, what's your list of things? Like, stuff really hits the fan right now. What do you do?
Well, my number one is procrastinate to heck.
Okay.
I love avoiding the problem entirely. That seems to be a major theme in my life and work. When I hit on a challenge, I will just ignore it until it's like the last minute, and then I will eventually do it, and it will all be fine, and I'll be like, why didn't I just do that weeks ago?
Okay.
So that seems to be like the major common behavioral pattern, is just sort of avoidance and ignoring.
Got it. So it sounds like avoidance. So it's a kind of, from a Buddhist perspective, you might say unconsciousness, to be unconscious if possible. Mm-hmm. How does that sound for you? Does that fit?
Yeah, that sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah. So often something's overwhelming, it starts to happen, and the system, this body-mind system, says, I need to find something that can take the place of this in my consciousness. Maybe it's Netflix, maybe it's that delicious meal that you can plan for the future, but something to fill this space. So in terms of the values you mentioned, peace, joy, knowledge, love, how does that help, or how does that fit in with those?
In some ways it does, in some ways it doesn't. I suppose.
What ways does it fit in? Because we wouldn't do it if it didn't fill a need, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the sort of paradoxes of meditation practice is it makes it very easy to avoid life situations, because I've got this challenging bit of work to do. I can just go meditate for an hour, and it's not on my mind at all, and in that way, meditation does contribute to those values, but then the work doesn't get done.
Right.
So there's kind of this strange paradox of like meditation can almost be kind of bypassing the problems.
100%
happening.
Yeah, and that's I'm sure you've heard the term spiritual bypass, where we can use really valuable tools in a way that actually skirts something that is important for us spiritually or psychologically or emotionally. And that's one reason why I try to zoom out and keep looking at all these different parts, because if I said, oh, it sounds like your concentration's great right now, let's really plow into some of this, more spacious material, that's excellent, unless there's some larger context that we want to fit that into. It's not that it's a bad practice, but it's helpful to know the larger context. So it sounds like part of it is actually working well. It actually helps cool the system down. You don't have to worry about something you're worried about. That's actually one of the great benefits of meditation. But it also sounds like you're saying that it has a kind of numbing effect to something that is actually important to you in terms of your larger value set.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I've found that as practice goes on, slowly that kind of issue is getting better, because the concentration power I can sort of apply to the work and I can flow more easily, but it hasn't really stopped it entirely. And there's a growing kind of, like we were talking about before, acceptance of what's happening as well. So, okay, the procrastination's happening. I'm not all that stressed by it, So just let it kind of unfold, and then eventually it will work itself out, probably. So, yeah, I guess this is kind of thing of like, am I making this into a problem or not?
I don't know. It sounds like when we sort of went over the things that were challenging for you, the emotional experience that I noticed, you were just like, procrastination. You're like, it's the first thing I go to. So it seems like whether it's a real problem or not, you're experiencing it as something that isn't working for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so our goal would be to find a wedge through which we can use practice, and also all of the practices of sila, of morality, of growth and improvement, to try to break through that. So one of the things you listed as your break the glass solution is to connect with procrastination. But you said then you reach the end of your rope, and finally you have to take a little bit of action. So if things went really wrong, let's say it wasn't just a work thing, some kind of personal difficulty arose, what is your break the glass solution?
So like a sort of personal conflict or something like that?
Yeah.
Usually I'm okay with that, and we'll just sort of talk it out. I think the initial reaction is still the kind of avoid, leave the room, calm down, but then, get back and sort of talk things over.
Yeah.
So it seems like for personal conflict, there's the same kind of pattern, but it's resolved much quicker.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I'm going to spend weeks not addressing it.
Yeah.
Maybe a few minutes. So
great. So personal conflict, it seems like you have a pretty good, set of tools that you use to manage that. What about if there was like a personal tragedy, someone passing away, some illness, or basically this happens to everyone at different points in their life, but even a kind of an intense sickness can show us, wow, this body is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to last forever. A lot of people who I work with are, closer to my age, and they'll suddenly realize, wow, like there's actually a taste of a recognition of death. Not to put it in overly dramatic terms, but what about something like that?
Well, early in my life, my friend died when I was a teenager, so I experienced that quite sort of suddenly. And at the time, again, it was the avoidance, I think, because I remember feeling very numb and didn't really feel anything about it necessarily. And it wasn't until, all these years later where I realized, oh, actually, that was very traumatic.
Yeah.
And I'm still kind of processing that. But at the time, it was kind of nothing. It felt like nothing was going on, but obviously there was, and I just wasn't facing it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
More recently, my partner was in hospital a few years ago, like serious emergency medicine stuff, and that kind of, at the time I'd been meditating a few years, and actually that was great because I was so much more able to be present with her and with, the feelings and what was going on. So I can see how practice has helped there, to stop sort of suppressing this reaction and just notice what's happening.
Yeah. So it sounds like you actually have a pretty robust set of toolkits around the practice, but also in connecting with your partner, in connecting with people when there's a conflict, actually taking a little time to get a little resiliency back, returning to the situation, negotiating what happened for you. Sounds like you actually have a pretty robust set of tools.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah. I think mainly the problem is that in my job, people just sort of trust me to get on with it, and then I'll kind of abuse that trust in some way just by being like, yeah, it's happening, I'm doing stuff, and I'm not.
Yeah. So that sounds like something that you would like to be different.
Yeah.
Well, given that you have this strong, robust set of tools, what do you think what has worked for you in the past in terms of breaking through some of this material? Because the short version is, unconscious material can't survive in the sunlight of consciousness, and there's a dozen different ways to bring this material to the foreground. So again, I'm just doing a little bit of zooming out so you can tell what I'm talking about. But when you zoom out and say, what are the things, should I go down this path of exploring spaciousness? Well, let's see. If this is something is important to deal with, then we can see how that relates to those experiences. So what are your thoughts? What might you use in order to break up this experience? Or what have you used in the past to break up something like this?
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of the work behavior is like, I had a really challenging problem and I can't sort of immediately solve it. I get these kind of, very disgust feelings kind of in my body, like, ooh, I feel challenged, and I want to avoid that feeling of being challenged. And maybe the spaciousness is a way to kind of accept that and hold it while getting on with it.
Yeah, and it could be, it could be, but I also want to, we don't have to necessarily go down that road, but so just to look at the detail, you have these experiences and there's sort of a sense of disgust that arises because it feels like you're being confronted or that kind of thing, that there's this conflict. Is that about accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're suggesting, and this might actually be a great way, is to use that spaciousness in relationship to that feeling of being challenged, that kind of disgust, potentially to use that as a way to dismantle that. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever done something like that?
I have, here and there, but it's in the moment sometimes quite tricky to kind of, get the kind of prompt to do it.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
it's something I'll have to experiment with.
Well, let's. We have a little time right now. Let's spend a few minutes and we'll just experiment with it right now. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So find a nice position. Taking a few comfortable deep breaths. Just gently closing the eyes. So beginning by feeling the sensations in the body. Noticing the speed of the mind. We've just been having a lively conversation, so the mind will likely still be trotting along at the same pace. So zooming out a bit to see if we can observe this turbulence, this speed of the mind of a lively conversation. Observing all the turbulence together. In a sense, letting awareness become soft and open. And allowing a bit of awareness to drop into the body, to notice any emotional response that's arising. We just touched into some challenging material, so it's likely there's maybe a trace of that. Or if we don't have any trace emotion, we can just detect where we might normally feel it. And let those sensations flood outwards. We can almost feel as though the spaciousness the sense of thin emptiness around our sense of space is pulling out on those emotional experiences. Teaching us how to let them open. If we notice that the body wants to breathe in any particular way, in order to allow this to be more available, feeling free to do so. Recognizing that any emotion that's arising, whether it's present moment emotion, light and effervescent on the surface of the body, or old emotion, somatically held deeper in the body, contractive, can feel a bit more like a Charlie horse. Whatever emotion is arising is an expression of nature, just like this spacious, open quality. So connecting with that nature aspect of both of these experiences. Both are neutral. Both are holding our experience, teaching us about themselves. Seeing if we can settle into them together as something which is holding us, holding our experience, supporting us. Teaching us about the nature of nature. So staying with this object, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, eventually allowing the eyes to settle on one point. Seeing if we can recontact the objects of meditation. Okay. What was that like? What came up for you?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, like you said, there was a sort of remnants of the sort of an echo of the disgust kind of feeling, like in my chest, in my belly, but being able to sort of expand them out into that space and then just kind of ground in the space and the nature aspects, it seemed to really kind of allow like a holding of what was happening and just allowing it all to flow, which is great.
Great. Wonderful. So that's one tact you could take. It's one of many, but it's sort of what I was feeling out from your experience might be helpful in that point.
Yeah, definitely. I'll work with that. That's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
lovely. Wonderful. So we still have some folks with us joining online. So thank you so much, Lewis, for joining us. Now we'll have a few more questions. I have about 5 more minutes before I have to jump off. Any other questions that came up for folks? What was that like to experience? Did you connect with the meditation? Because I really try to typically make the meditation very much structured for, I was making it for you, Lewis. What was that like for you? Or do you have any questions remaining yourself, Lewis, that you'd like to explore?
I'm not sure, but I do have to leave in about 2 minutes.
Okay,
so
I'll let you go.
I've got a yoga class.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, it was great to see you. I won't keep you on here any longer. I'll jump back to the solo cam.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Absolutely. I'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. What else came up? How is that for you? Okay, let's see. Cool Pseudonym says, I enjoyed listening to the conversation. Thank you for putting yourself out there, Lewis. Thank you, Lewis. Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I really appreciate the honesty. I appreciate just being where you're at and talking about what's going on. I think this is the real Dharma for me. This is the real depth. I think a lot of the psychedelic material and a lot of the material around awakening, we want to use these as levers to change our lives. I talk to people all the time and they say, I really want awakening, which is great. I don't, discourage that at all. But the question ends up being, what do you do after stream entry? What do you do after that? What's your plan? And usually they're like, well, I'm not really worried about that. I'm just sort of going for this thing. So then the question becomes, well, why? Why do you want that? And that's where it comes back to values for me. What kind of life do you want to live? Because I know people who've experienced very deep awakening and they can be very sad or lonely or feel isolated. So we get the kind of awakening that we optimize for. So for me, it's very important from the beginning to be looking at what do we want to move towards? And of course, pursuing awakening is a totally valid thing if that's what you want to do. Some people don't. But what is this? Why? Why are we doing this? So that's generally what I think about. So thank you everyone for joining. It was so lovely to have you here today. Thank you again for Lewis for co-hosting, for Ferdy for being our co-host here. Very, very appreciated. And for Deborah, who gave this lovely donation. Thank you so much for that, Deborah. And everyone for your questions and just being here. If you like this segment, if you like what we did today here, let me know. This is a new experiment. We haven't had any kind of student-type guests on. Oh, Lewis, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. We haven't had many students on here. And I'm using that a little bit loosely. I don't want to call you a student as though it's pejorative, but typically we've had other teachers, people that I might, teach out with, that kind of thing. So actually doing kind of Dharma diagnosis, that sort of thing. Let's see any other comments here. I searched the values sort and came up with a few different similar results. Would love the link that I mentioned. So I'm just going to search really quick for folks so you can have the link. Values. The name of the writer is the guy who invented motivational interviewing. It's not Williams, Murray Morris. Oh, it's, here it is. Okay, I'll give you the link to this. This is it. Got it. Miller. His name is Miller. So there's the link. Really valuable tool. Cut them up. Get your top 10. You can redefine them. You can do it any way you like. I'll include a link. If we do a playback of this, I'm going to include a link. So thank you folks so much for joining. Look forward to seeing you soon. Tomorrow we're going to be doing some more practice, some more meditation. Super fun. Maybe we'll do a video watching. I think I might do watching Wednesdays. So that'll be the premise there. And of course you can continue to chat after the live stream ends. And thanks everyone. Really happy you're here. Look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you again. And again, feel free to chat after we hit the ending screen here. All right, folks, see you soon. Bye. Have a great day, everybody. Don't forget to have fun.